Humiliated and alone at the altar, Clarina fought back tears as her groom stepped away in disgust at her handmade gown, drawing cruel laughter from the high society guests. That mockery was abruptly cut short, however, when the heavy oak doors of the cathedral shattered inward, revealing a convoy of black Maybachs surrounding the church. Clarina Davies never belonged in Preston Carmichael's world, and his family made sure she knew it every single day. At 27, Clarina was a dedicated ER trauma nurse at Boston Medical Center, accustomed to 12-hour shifts, the scent of antiseptic, and the adrenaline of saving lives. Preston, on the other hand, was the heir to Carmichael Shipping and Logistics, a blue blood dynasty with estates in Newport, Rhode Island, and bank accounts resting comfortably in the Cayman Islands. To Clarina, Preston had initially been charming, a sweeping romance that felt like a fairy tale. But to Beatrice Carmichael, Preston's mother, Clarina was an infection, a gold digger, a nobody attempting to infiltrate Boston's elite. The wedding was set at St. Mary's Episcopal Church in Newport, a magnificent Gothic structure that had hosted generations of old money. Outside, the ocean breeze whipped against the fleet of Bentleys and Rolls-Royces, dropping off the 400 invited guests, CEOs, senators, and socialites. Inside the bridal suite, Clarina stared at her reflection, her stomach twisting into a painful knot. She wasn't wearing a custom Vera Wang or an exclusive Oscar de la Renta gown. Just 3 days prior, her pristine, hard-earned $3,000 silk dress had been accidentally ruined when Beatrice's assistant spilled an entire tray of blackberry mimosas over it. Beatrice had offered a hollow, icy apology, claiming there was no time to buy a replacement and that Clarina would just have to make do. Preston had merely shrugged, telling Clarina, "Mother is stressed, don't make a big deal out of it." With no money left and no time, Clarina had resorted to a desperate measure. She had tailored her late grandmother's wedding dress. It was a simple, vintage ivory gown made of Chantilly lace and modest cotton lining. Clarina had spent 2 sleepless nights at her 1980s Singer sewing machine, altering the hem and taking in the waist. To her, it held immense sentimental value. To the billionaires sitting in the pews, it was a glaring red flag of her poverty. It looks exactly like what it is. Chloe, Preston's younger sister, sneered as she walked into the suite, adjusting her own $5,000 diamond choker. A thrift store tragedy. Are you seriously walking down our aisle in that? Clarina swallowed the lump in her throat, lifting her chin. It was my grandmother's. It means a lot to me, Chloe. Chloe scoffed, turning on her designer heels. Just don't stand too close to the floral arrangements. We paid $80,000 for the white orchids, and I'd hate for your cheap polyester to ruin the aesthetic. When the heavy wooden doors of the sanctuary finally opened and the organ swelled with Wagner's bridal chorus, Clarina took a deep breath. She had no father to walk her down the aisle, so she walked alone. She gripped her bouquet of simple white roses, her knuckles white. As she stepped into the massive vaulted nave, the whispers began. They weren't subtle. In the world of the ultra-rich, cruelty was a spectator sport. Clarina could see the disdain rippling through the pews. Women in feathered fascinators leaned into their husbands, hiding their smirks behind manicured hands. Is that cotton? Good Lord, it looks like a nightgown. I heard Beatrice refuse to pay for a dress. Can you blame her? Preston looks absolutely mortified. Clarina's eyes locked onto Preston, standing at the altar. She expected to see a reassuring smile, a look of love that would melt the freezing judgment of the room. Instead, she saw a man, shifting uncomfortably in his bespoke Tom Ford tuxedo. His jaw was clenched. His face was flushed with embarrassment. He wasn't looking at Clarina's eyes. He was looking at the fraying lace near her collarbone. When Clarina finally reached the altar, the silence in the church was deafening. The priest cleared his throat and began the ceremony, but the tension was thick enough to cut with a knife. "Dearly beloved," the priest's voice echoed off the stained glass. "We are gathered here today to unite Preston and Clarina." "Stop!" a voice interrupted. The word cracked like a whip. Clarina gasped, turning her head. Beatrice Carmichael stood up from the front pew, her posture rigid, her eyes dripping with absolute contempt. "Mother, please," Preston hissed under his breath, though he made no move to stop her. "I will not sit here and watch my son make the biggest mistake of his life," Beatrice announced, her voice carrying flawlessly across the silent cathedral. She gestured dismissively at Clarina. "Look at her, Preston. Look at what she is wearing to the most important society event of the decade. She didn't even try. She is making a mockery of our family name. She looks cheap." "She is cheap." Laughter, low, cruel, and mocking, rippled through the crowd. Some guests actually pulled out their iPhones, recording the humiliation. Clarina's heart shattered against her ribs. Tears, hot and fast, pricked her eyes. She turned to Preston, her voice a desperate whisper. "Preston, say something. Defend me." Preston looked at his mother, then at the sea of judging billionaires, and finally at Clarina. His eyes were cold, completely devoid of the man she thought she loved. "She's right, Clarina," Preston muttered, stepping back from the altar, physically distancing himself from her. "I can't do this. I have investors here. The board of directors is watching. I told you to look presentable, and you show up looking like a peasant. I can't tie my family's legacy to this." Clarina felt the floor drop out from beneath her. "Preston, it's my grandmother's dress. Your mother ruined mine." "Enough!" Preston snapped, his voice echoing in the microphone. "The wedding is off. I am so sorry to my family and our guests for this embarrassment." The laughter grew louder. A bridesmaid, one of Chloe's wealthy friends, purposely bumped into Clarina, causing her to drop her bouquet. "Whoops," the girl giggled. "Time to take the trash out." Clarina stood frozen, completely abandoned at the altar. The man she loved had just discarded her like garbage over a piece of fabric. The elite crowd sneered, pointing and whispering, drowning her in a tidal wave of humiliation. She closed her eyes, wishing the marble floor would open up and swallow her whole. And then, the heavy, reinforced oak doors at the back of the cathedral exploded open with a violent, ear-splitting crash. The cruel laughter died instantly. Outside the cathedral, the deafening roar of high-performance engines drowned out the church organ. 4. Matte black Mercedes G, 63 AMGs, and 2 armored Maybachs had violently jumped the curb, barricading the church's entrance. The sheer aggression of the vehicles sent a shock wave of panic through the elite crowd. Before anyone could scream, a dozen men poured into the cathedral. They didn't look like wedding crashers. They were massive, silent, and lethal. Dressed in immaculate, tailored Brioni suits, their eyes were hidden behind dark sunglasses, and the distinct bulges of holstered weapons pressed against their jackets. With terrifying efficiency they fanned out, locking the heavy side doors and blocking the main exit. "What is the meaning of this?" Richard Carmichael, Preston's father, barked, standing up. "I am calling the chief of police. Do you know who I am?" One of the men in black merely looked at Richard, a dead, empty stare that made the billionaire swallow his words and slowly sit back down. Then the air in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Footsteps, slow and deliberate, echoed on the marble floor. Gabriel Costa stepped into the light of the stained glass. He was a myth spoken of in terrified whispers in the boardrooms of Boston and New York. Gabriel Costa wasn't just wealthy. He was the apex predator of the East Coast. He controlled the ports, the unions, and the underground syndicates. He was a man who toppled empires with a phone call and vanished enemies with a whisper. Standing 6'3", with razor-sharp features, dark, piercing eyes, and a faint silver scar cutting through his left eyebrow, Gabriel radiated an aura of pure, unadulterated power. He wore a bespoke charcoal 3-piece suit that cost more than most people made in a decade, a Patek Philippe Nautilus flashing on his wrist. Richard Carmichael went completely white. He grabbed his wife's arm, his voice trembling. "Beatrice, shut up. Don't say a word. That's Costa." Preston, previously so arrogant and concerned with his image, now looked like a terrified child. He backed away from the altar, nearly tripping over the priest. Gabriel ignored the billionaires. He ignored the trembling groom. He ignored the armed guards securing the perimeter. His dark eyes were locked entirely on one person, Clarina. Clarina stared at him, her breath hitching. She knew him. Exactly 14 months ago, during a chaotic blackout in the Boston Med ER, a man had been brought in through the loading dock, bleeding out from a severed femoral artery, the result of a violent syndicate ambush. The hospital system was down. The other doctors had panicked, but Clarina hadn't. She had clamped the artery with her bare hands, operating in the dark, with only a flashlight held in her teeth, covered in his blood. She didn't ask questions. She didn't judge him. She just fought like hell to keep his heart beating. Before he was quietly smuggled out of the hospital by his men before dawn, Gabriel had grabbed her bloody wrist. "I owe you a life, little bird," he had whispered, his voice gravelly with pain. And Gabriel Costa never leaves a debt unpaid. She hadn't seen him since. Until now. Gabriel walked slowly down the aisle, the sea of terrified aristocrats parting for him like the Red Sea. When he reached the altar, he stopped in front of Clarina. The intimidating, ruthless monster of the underworld looked down at her with a softness that defied logic. He reached out, his massive, calloused hand gently catching a tear that fell down her cheek. "They have no idea what they're laughing at, Clarina," Gabriel said, his deep, resonant voice carrying through the dead, silent church. He took off his custom suit jacket. With immense care, he draped it over Clarina's trembling shoulders, covering her handmade lace dress, shielding her from the predatory eyes of the room. The jacket smelled of expensive cologne and petrichor, and it immediately made her feel safe. Gabriel slowly turned his head to look at Preston. The softness vanished, replaced by a cold, calculating malice that made Preston whimper audibly. "You," Gabriel said, the word dripping with venom. "You had a queen standing in front of you, and you threw her away because a room full of court jesters laughed." I... Preston stammered, his knees physically shaking. "Mr. Costa, please, this is a private family matter." "Nothing regarding Clarina is private to me anymore," Gabriel interrupted, stepping closer to Preston. The height difference was staggering. Gabriel towered over the air. "Your family owes my syndicate $40 million from your failed shipping ventures last quarter, Preston. Your father has been begging me for an extension. I was going to grant it." Gabriel tilted his head, a dark smile playing on his lips. "Not anymore. I'm taking the ships. I'm taking the Newport properties. I'm taking it all." Beatrice Carmichael gasped loudly, clutching her chest. Richard buried his face in his hands. In 30 seconds, Gabriel Costa had ruined the Carmichael dynasty. Gabriel turned his back on the ruined groom and faced Clarina again. The entire church watched in paralyzed disbelief as the most dangerous man in America gracefully dropped to one knee on the marble floor. Gasps echoed through the cathedral. Gabriel reached into his vest pocket and pulled out a sleek black velvet box. He flipped it open, and the sunlight, catching the object inside, nearly blinded the front row. It wasn't just a ring. It was a weapon of pure financial dominance. Resting on the velvet cushion was a flawless, 12-carat vivid pink diamond, flanked by 2 spear-cut white diamonds. It was a legendary piece custom-crafted by Graf, widely known in the diamond trade to be worth upwards of $10 million. It was a ring meant for royalty, not a trauma nurse. "You saved my life in the dark, Clarina," Gabriel said softly, looking up into her wide, shocked eyes. "You asked for nothing in return. For over a year, I have watched you from the shadows, making sure you were safe. But watching this..." He gestured to the altar, his jaw tightening. "I will not stand in the shadows anymore." He took her left hand, his thumb brushing over her knuckles. "Let me be the shield you deserve. Marry me, Clarina. Let me give you my empire, my protection, and my life. Say yes, and I promise you no one in this city will ever dare to laugh at you again." Clarina stood frozen, the weight of the $10 million diamond glittering in front of her, the eyes of the terrified elite watching her every move as she realized her life was about to change forever. The silence in street. Mary's cathedral was so profound that the gentle ticking of Gabriel Costa's Patek Philippe could be heard by those standing closest to the altar. Clarina stared at the massive 12-carat pink diamond glittering in the black velvet box. Her mind raced, struggling to process the surreal turn of events. Less than 10 minutes ago, she was the punchline to a cruel joke, abandoned by a man who valued a country club membership over her heart. Now, the most feared man on the eastern seaboard was kneeling at her feet, offering her the world. "Clarina," Preston stammered, stepping forward, his voice cracking with a mixture of terror and sudden, desperate greed. He had just realized the gravity of his family's financial obliteration. "Clarina, don't do this. He's a criminal. The FBI has been trying to build a RICO case against him for years. You can't seriously be considering this. We just had a misunderstanding. We can fix this." Gabriel didn't even turn his head. He subtly raised 2 fingers. Immediately, a mountain of a man in a Brioni suit stepped out of the shadows, grabbing Preston by the collar of his Tom Ford tuxedo and shoving him backward. Preston collided with a marble pillar, gasping for air as the bodyguard's massive forearm pressed against his throat. "Keep your mouth shut, Carmichael," the bodyguard growled, his hand resting menacingly on the grip of his concealed firearm. Beatrice Carmichael let out a muffled shriek, clutching her husband's arm. The high society guests in the pews, senators, hedge fund managers, and real estate tycoons, shrank back into their seats. These were people used to wielding power through lawyers and boardrooms. They had absolutely no defense against the raw, unadulterated force of the underworld. Clarina looked at Preston, pinned against the marble, looking pathetic and small. Then she looked down at Gabriel. His dark eyes were fixed solely on her, patient and remarkably tender, contrasting violently with the chaos his presence had caused. "Why?" Clarina whispered, her voice trembling slightly. Why go to all this trouble for me? Because in a world full of people who only look at what they can extract from others, you are the only person who ever looked at me and saw a life worth saving. Gabriel replied softly, his gravelly tone meant only for her. I have wealth. I have power. I have an army, but I don't have peace, Clarina. When you touched me in that emergency room, when you fought the Grim Reaper for a man, you didn't even know. You gave me peace. You are worth more than every ship the Carmichaels own. A tear slipped down Clarina's cheek, washing away the last traces of her heartbreak. The humiliation she had felt moments ago evaporated, replaced by a profound, terrifying sense of empowerment. She didn't care about the whispers of the elite anymore. She didn't care about the rumors or the judgment. She looked at the man who had just dismantled her bullies without a second thought. Yes, Clarina said, her voice steadying. It echoed clearly through the vaulted ceilings of the nave. Yes, Gabriel. A genuine, breathtaking smile broke across Gabriel's stoic face. He took her left hand, gently sliding the $10 million Graf pink diamond onto her ring finger. It was heavy, cold, and a perfect fit. The sheer brilliance of the stone caught the light of the stained glass, casting prismatic reflections across the church. Gabriel stood up, his towering frame dwarfing everyone around him. He wrapped his arm protectively around Clarina's waist, pulling her flush against his side. He then turned his attention back to the terrified crowd, the warmth in his eyes vanishing entirely. "Arthur," Gabriel called out. A sharp-dressed lieutenant with a tablet stepped forward. "Yes, boss." "Execute the hostile takeover of Carmichael Shipping," Gabriel ordered, his voice echoing like thunder. "Call Harrison at the Securities and Exchange Commission. Anonymously forward the encrypted files I gave you last night, the ones detailing Richard Carmichael's offshore tax evasion in the Cayman Islands and the fabricated quarterly earnings. Then call the First National Bank of Boston. Call in all their margin loans. Today." Richard Carmichael let out a choked gasp, clutching his chest. "Gabriel, Mr. Costa, please. You'll destroy 5 generations of wealth in an afternoon. You'll put us on the street." Gabriel's expression remained carved from granite. "You put my future wife on display to be mocked. You laughed at her grandmother's memory. Be grateful I am only taking your money, Richard." Beatrice, her face devoid of all color, finally broke. The sheer arrogance that had defined her existence shattered. She scrambled forward, practically falling to her knees at Clarina's feet, uncaring that she was dragging her $15,000 Chanel dress across the marble floor. "Clarina, Clarina, please," Beatrice begged, sobbing hysterically. "You are a kind girl. You're a nurse. You heal people. Tell him to stop. Please, I beg you, forgive us. The dress is beautiful, it really is. I'm sorry." Clarina looked down at the woman who had tormented her for over a year. She felt a brief flash of pity. But then she remembered the intentional sabotage of her dress, the sneers, and the cold abandonment at the altar. "You're right, Beatrice. I do heal people," Clarina said quietly, her voice ringing with newfound authority. "But some infections just need to be cut out." Gabriel smirked, clearly impressed. He kissed the side of Clarina's head. "Let's go home, little bird." Surrounded by a phalanx of armed men, Gabriel led Clarina down the aisle. The same aristocrats who had laughed at her mere minutes ago now cast their eyes downward, terrified to even make eye contact with the new queen of the East Coast Syndicate. They walked out of the heavy oak doors and into the bright Rhode Island sunshine. Gabriel opened the heavy armored door of the lead Maybach himself. Clarina climbed into the plush leather interior, the heavy scent of new money and power enveloping her. As the convoy roared to life and sped away from the cathedral, Clarina looked out the tinted window, watching the Carmichael dynasty, physically and metaphorically, crumble in the rearview mirror. 6 months later. The skyline of the Boston Seaport District glittered against the twilight sky. Inside the penthouse office of the newly established Davies Medical Foundation, Clarina stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows, reviewing a stack of architectural blueprints. Her life had transformed entirely, yet the core of who she was remained untouched. She hadn't abandoned her medical calling. Instead, with the limitless backing of Gabriel's legitimate business fronts, she had founded a state-of-the-art trauma clinic dedicated to treating uninsured and low-income patients. She wore a sharp, tailored navy pantsuit, and on her left hand, the $10 million pink diamond caught the city lights. A soft knock on the mahogany door interrupted her thoughts. Gabriel walked in, shedding his suit jacket and rolling up his sleeves, revealing the intricate ink that mapped his forearms. The ruthless kingpin of Boston always softened the moment he crossed the threshold into her presence. "You're working late, Dr. Davies," Gabriel teased, wrapping his arms around her from behind and pressing a kiss to her neck. "Just finalizing the pediatric wing," Clarina smiled, leaning back against his solid chest. "Did Arthur handle the supply chain issue?" "Handled," Gabriel said, though a dark amusement danced in his eyes. "Speaking of supply chains, I have a late wedding gift for you. A bit of information my men uncovered while auditing the remnants of Carmichael shipping." Clarina turned around, raising an eyebrow. "I thought we were done with them. I read in the Boston Globe that Richard is facing federal indictment and they had to auction off the Newport estate." "We are done with them," Gabriel agreed, trailing a finger down her cheek. "But I needed you to know the full truth of why you were standing at that altar in the first place." Gabriel walked over to her desk and tossed a manila folder onto the glass surface. "Preston never intended to marry you, Clarina. The Carmichaels have been bankrupt for 2 years. They were hemorrhaging money. The only way Preston could save his family was by marrying Victoria Kensington, the heiress to the Kensington banking fortune. But Victoria wouldn't commit until Preston ended things with you." Clarina stared at the folder, the final puzzle pieces clicking into place. The ruined dress, the hostility at the altar. It wasn't an accident. "No," Gabriel said coldly. "Beatrice orchestrated the spilling of the drinks on your gown. Preston orchestrated the public humiliation. They wanted you to look so pathetic, so cheap, that breaking up with you at the altar would look justified to their high society peers. They wanted the narrative to be that you were a fraud, clearing the way for Preston to pivot to Victoria seamlessly." A cold chill ran down Clarina's spine. The cruelty of it was staggering. It wasn't just snobbery. It was a calculated psychological assassination. "But you ruined their plan," Clarina realized, a slow smile spreading across her face. "By destroying their company before Preston could marry Victoria, the Kensingtons backed out. No one wants to merge with a bankrupt, federally indicted family." "Exactly," Gabriel grinned, a dangerous lupine expression. "Preston is currently managing a mid-level logistics warehouse in New Jersey. His mother is living in a 2-bedroom apartment in Queens. They got exactly what they deserved." Clarina looked at the man in front of her. The world called him a monster, a criminal, a mob boss. But to her, he was the fiercest protector she could have ever asked for. He didn't just save her from humiliation. He had dismantled the corrupt system that tried to crush her. "Thank you," Clarina whispered, stepping into his arms. "I told you, little bird. I don't leave debts unpaid." Gabriel murmured, resting his forehead against hers. "Now, we have a plane to catch. Our actual wedding starts in 48 hours. 2 days later, on the private, heavily guarded shores of Lake Como, Italy, Clarina finally got the wedding she deserved. There were no laughing socialites. There were no sneering aristocrats. The guest list consisted only of Gabriel's most trusted inner circle, loyal men and women who respected Clarina not for her bank account, but for the fierce, unshakable spirit that had tamed their boss. And as the sun set over the pristine Italian waters, casting a golden hue across the villa, Clarina walked down the aisle. She didn't wear Vera Wang or Oscar de la Renta. She wore her grandmother's vintage cotton and Chantilly lace gown. However, Gabriel had secretly flown in master tailors from Milan to restore it. They hadn't changed the design, but they had reinforced the delicate lace and hand-stitched hundreds of tiny, flawless diamonds into the bodice, making the humble fabric shimmer like the night sky. As Gabriel waited for her at the altar, looking devastatingly handsome in a classic black tuxedo, his eyes filled with absolute reverence. He didn't see a cheap dress. He saw the woman who had braved the dark to save his life, standing before him as his equal, his partner, and his queen. They exchanged vows under a canopy of white roses, far away from the toxic elite of Boston. And when Gabriel finally pulled Clarina in for a kiss, sealing their union, a roar of genuine applause and celebration erupted from the crowd. They had tried to bury Clarina Davies in humiliation, but they had forgotten one crucial detail. She was a survivor, and when she fell into the dark, she didn't just find a way out. She found the king of the underworld, and together they built an empire of their own. Did Clarina make the right choice, leaving a billionaire for a mafia kingpin? If you loved this story of ultimate revenge and true loyalty, don't forget to hit that like button, share this video with your friends, and subscribe to our channel for more dramatic, real-life storytelling. Ring the notification bell so you never miss an update. What would you have done in Clarina's shoes? Let us know in the comments below.